What up, guys? Welcome to today's podcast, the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. We're here today with Dante Leon. He's a guy who I've watched him compete since he was a teenager. He was doing a lot of the same competitions that Chad was doing back in the day, like the Nogi pans and everything else.
He's a little younger than Chad.
A little bit younger, but they were kind of like floating around the same time. I remember seeing him, and then when he was in Ohio, I remember seeing him, as a young guy out there competing and stuff like that. So he's been around the area and noticed him, and he's a guy that I like watching. So like one of the sort of, I guess you'd say, when I'm going through and like looking for guests, one of the sort of the qualifications typically is,
prerequisites.
Obviously, if you're a friend or I just think you're really interesting, then that's it, right? That's fine. But a lot of times, like when it comes to competitors, I'm looking for people who have games that I like watching. You know what I mean? If you're like a bazillion time world champion, but you put me to sleep to watch, or I just don't really enjoy the style. I'm not that interested.
Not put you to sleep in a choke, but put you to sleep because you're boring.
Yeah, or just, and again, I don't mean that in any negative way. Just I'm not as interested. But
some people's styles are not the most appealing to even if you're a jiu-jitsu athlete or someone that trains, still certain ones are more fun to watch.
Yeah, but I mean, Dante, he's super skilled. Obviously, he's a very high level competitor. He's been in the ADCCs. He's won a number of super fight organizations, and he has some really slick submissions out there. To his name and to his credit. And so again, I wanted to have him on the podcast. I've also run into him several times just as a short story. Actually, I'll save the short story for after when we're done talking to him. So we get into the podcast.
All right.
I don't want to go off forever. So anyway, thank you guys for being here today to listen to the podcast. Hope you enjoy it. Hope we talk about a lot of specific tips on training that could be useful to you, whether you're a newbie to training or you're someone with more experience. So a lot of good training tips in this one. Big thanks to our sponsors for helping make the podcast happen. Charles Webb CBD. Again, guys, if you're interested in things such as recovery, there's a lot of things that you can do, right? Diet, sleep. We talk about it later in the podcast, joint training and stretching, different things to loosen up the joints and take care of the joints. Also lifting weights, right? All these things can be a part of helping you recover and keeping your body strong. Supplementation then kind of comes into the mix after those things, right? There's different supplements that I take on a regular basis, everything from like creatine to magnesium and some other things. And CBD is one of them that I feel like I get something from, right? I try it out. I like it. It seems to help. And again, Charles Webb is the CBD that I use, the sponsor that we've had on the podcast for a number of years, and they make a really good product. Years ago, we went out to went into one of their farms in Colorado and, met the people that work there, saw kind of their operation. And again, the thing that they're really dedicated to is making sure they make a really good, pure product that, again, even if FDA regulations aren't governing them, and they could put out a lesser product, they choose not to. They choose to put out a better product, that's, better for us. And so again, if you guys have never tried CBD, or if you'd like to give it a try to see if it helps at your recovery, I personally like taking mine at night. I typically take some vitamins at night, including things like magnesium, which tends to help. And I'll have my shower. And then after the shower, right before the shower, I'll take the CBD. And again, I seem to get a benefit from it. I like it for recovery and for helping support some healthy sleep cycles. If you guys want to try it out for yourself, the website is charlottesweb.com. The promo code is JiuJitsu30 for 30% off the order. Also, thanks to my buddy Matt at Epic Roll. If you guys have never been to his website before, check him out at epicrollbjj.com. He just got done supporting the PGF World Tournament, which was amazing. It was so much fun. It was a great tournament to watch. One of the things that I really like about the format is that the matches are short.
Like five or six?
Six. It's like 6-minute matches, if I'm correct, right? 6-minute matches, except for the finale, which was different. But the regular season matches were 6 minutes, which I think is a perfect time to just get in and get after it. Let's not screw around. Like every, good competitor knows they can, burn it up for 6 minutes. And so you didn't have a whole lot of stalling. There were a few times where they had to call them, but they were really, really quick to the stalling calls, which I like. And again, Matt was out there supporting that tournament, and you saw the guys wearing the Epic Roll gear.
It's pretty cool.
And again, it's good gear. I really like it. It's something where, again, I get my rash guards for the gym and for the Jiu-Jitsu rash guards. Speaking of which, we're going to have a new prototype coming out. I'll let you know more about it soon. But we get all of our stuff made from Epic Roll because I like the quality, and I think Matt does a good job of making it good, and also does a good job of customer service. So anyway, if you guys would like to check out, if you want to get some new gear, whether it be a rash guard, shorts, gis, hoodies, whatever, anything jiu-jitsu related, check them out at epicrollbjj.com and use the promo code JiuJitsu20 for 20% off. Also, if you guys want to support the podcast directly, you can do so by becoming a patron at our Patreon site, patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. When you join up, you'll get access to the library of content that we have produced over the years, which has everything from clips from the podcast with guests giving you some specific idea to improve your training from every guest we've ever had. And then we also have things such as narrated roles and training videos. Eugene has if you guys hear, if you're going to hear in the podcast talking about certain joint training and stuff like that, and Eugene's sort of taken a lot of the different stuff that he's learned from all these different modalities of stretching and everything else, and how he knows the physical therapy background, right? And he sort of combined it into a warm-up or stretching routine, sort of a warm-up routine for jiu-jitsu. If you guys want to check it out, it's in there. And there's also some seminars that are recorded. And if you just don't like listening to these ads, the ad reads that we do at the beginning, you can also get an ad-free version of the podcast as well at patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And guys, last but not least, if you'd like to get my daily email, you can become a part of the Chew Crew, where it's at jiujitsu.net/join, JOIN. When you join up, you'll get access to a couple free ebooks that I give away. And then on top of that, you'll get my daily email, which will give you access to everything from books that I'm reading that I think are interesting. And I'll give little excerpts from that, to specific training strategies and stuff that I'm working on, to special events, discounts for products and stuff that I have coming up, and anything and everything. It just comes through there. So if you like the podcast, you like the videos, you'll like the email that I send out daily. And again, you can join up, get the ebooks, get all the extra gifts that I give away, and then you can unsubscribe at any time. And so guys, with that said, let's jump into this podcast with Dante. So dude, like, I don't know, because like, obviously we've passed each other and we've kind of like, talked a bit here and there. And I actually remember watching you compete when you were like a kid, like a teenager, because I remember one of my students, Chad, he would end up sometimes at the same tournaments that you were doing back in the day, like the Ohio Grappling Challenges and like some of the stuff up in New York and everything else. And when did you get started with jiu-jitsu?
I actually started jiu-jitsu when I was 12. Like the week of my 12th birthday is when I started. So I started when like 2007. So that's like with the first year that Worlds in the gi came to America,
Mm-hmm.
and that was the year that like no gi Worlds was introduced. Like the
Mm-hmm.
2007 was the first year of the no gi Worlds. So kind of like old school almost as far as like the new generation goes.
Yeah. And then why did you get into it at 12 years old? Like, why were you like, I want to go do jiu-jitsu? Was it like a fighting thing, or did you just get pushed into it from your parents or something?
Well, it wasn't really anything to do with like what I typically did. Typically, growing up in the region I grew up in, hockey was a big thing, baseball was a big thing, soccer. So played like the typical sports that kind of all the kids my age played or dabbled in, and stuck with hockey more so. But was always a fan of martial arts,
Mm-hmm.
um, mostly because of my dad. He's the one who introduced me to it since the very beginning,
Got it.
and at one point was in kind of a crossroads of didn't want to continue playing hockey at the level I was at. Was kind of losing my passion for that, wanting to uh, kind of change directions at 10, 11 years old. And I remember my mom asking me what I was going to do for the spring because I wasn't playing spring hockey, and I told her nothing, thinking I could just like sit at home and be lazy, and she wouldn't let that slide. So she told me I had to pick something to do, and she suggested a couple things. One of them was piano lessons,
Okay.
and then the other one was golf. So I kind of freaked out. I talked to my dad a little bit, and I said like, mom said this or this, and my dad said, "Do you want to try jujitsu?" And I was like, "Yeah, okay, for sure."
Anything but piano or like,
Yeah,
yeah, I got you.
yeah. So it was something I was familiar with, like a little bit. You know what I mean? I knew like the basics of it. I knew what it was. I didn't go into it completely blind, but I had no prior experience with any kind of formal training. So it was like, yeah, sure. It was like agreed upon right away.
Mm.
Anything
Did
to, not
did,
play golf.
did hockey help you at all? Like, do you feel like, I mean, because I don't know if at kids you probably can't check each other. I don't even know if you can as a kid. Like, do you feel like hockey helped like your transition to jujitsu?
Well, in Canada, you can hit from like second or third grade. You
Oh,
can,
nice.
yeah, you can just blast each other. That's at least how it used to be when I played. As soon as you play atom hockey, you can hit. So in the States, I think it was to like Pee Wee Major or Bantam Minor, which is like 12, 13, 14 years old that you couldn't hit. In Canada, it was like 7, 8 years old. You could just like full out blast each other.
Yeah.
So it makes it a much tougher sport than what you're like typically used to playing or what you're kind of allowed to play in a gym class or when you're over at your friend's house, I guess. But the thing that I think it helped me the most was being able to be coachable. I think a lot of people that do jujitsu, a lot of times, and this isn't really a knock against anybody, but a lot of times people who do jujitsu are kind of like really like single minded. They haven't
Mhm.
played a lot of sports. They
Mhm.
might have been kind of like the nerdy type
The
that
geek
didn't
guys,
really
yeah.
play sports, you know what I mean? So they don't
Mhm.
really understand how to be coached or for somebody to tell them like yes or no about things because, they've kind of haven't ever really had that structure.
Mhm.
And when you play sports, especially team sports, it teaches you to be coached. You don't have a choice but to listen. You don't have a choice but to kind of follow some rules that aren't really set in stone. So it makes it easier to learn, I feel like.
Sure, and there's a lot of a lot of also where and you're playing those sports and you get coached by someone and then you see that there's value in that because you end up being successful at something. So it kind of reinforces that like, oh, if you find a good coach, just like shut up and listen to them and follow the directions that they're giving you.
Yeah, correct, exactly. And it teaches you too that there's, a lot of teams there's repercussions for not listening. There's repercussions for going against the rules. There's repercussions for not supporting your teammates. There's repercussions for all these kind of things that if you expand them out when you get into the real world, there's repercussions for those things in kind of all jobs or all walks of life. You know what I mean? You have to listen to your boss. You have to follow what the company's rules are, what the gym's rules are, anywhere you go. Planet Fitness might, not be everybody's cup of tea, but the rules are pretty bold on the wall that you can't slam weights. So like if
Yeah.
you want to be there, you have to follow the rules. You know what I mean?
Mm.
It comes down to things like that.
Yeah, it kind of makes me think about that because you think about a lot of guys, like you said, getting into jujitsu, they don't have like a sports background. Like you said, a lot of them are like they do jujitsu because they never figured out a sport that they liked, and they were maybe a lot of times kind of the nerds or the geeks in class. But those of us who played a team sport, even a sport like wrestling, where it's an individual sport, but there's still a very much of a team atmosphere. Sometimes
Mhm.
you can lose that in certain jujitsu gyms where, like you said, everybody's sort of individually focused instead of like having this big team camaraderie. And, again, it's one of those things where, like you said, I think maybe being on those teams, even if it is a team sport, when you get into the jiu-jitsu, it's an individual sport, but you're like, you're not just thinking of yourself, you're also thinking about the team. So maybe if you don't have a match coming up, you might be there to help the other guys drill,
Yeah.
even if you don't need it, right? Or, when you're rolling with your guys, like it's not just about you getting better, you're like taking care of your training partners because there's this team together.
Correct. I think the team, even though something is an individual sport, exactly what you said is like a team, a mindset that is heavily involved in team and core values through a team it's going to make everybody more successful. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's just going to make the cogs kind of fit a little cleaner. It's just going to help everybody. You're just there for each other more. If you don't have a competition coming up, but you're there to help somebody get ready, it gives you an opportunity to do something as well. It doesn't just
Yeah.
give you an opportunity to be like helping somebody out of the kindness of your heart. You can also use that time to get better yourself. You don't just need to be a pylon. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
It's when you develop that and you have that set in your gym, it allows your students to kind of explore more with the sport and kind of use it for a lot more than what it is typically of just I'm going to show up, I'm going to train hard for 4 weeks because I have a tourney coming up, and then basically have fun everybody else. I'm gone for a week, or
Right.
I'm going to be here but like my head's kind of up my ass because I think I'm shouldn't be here. I'm trying to like take it easy. So yeah, it creates a lot more when you have people who've played sports before. I think like the hurdles with them is a lot easier to overcome than some of the hurdles with the people who haven't played sports, especially in the beginning, because you don't have to teach them why they shouldn't be chilling or why they shouldn't be resting, things like that. They're typically driven. They're typically like hard workers. They know like what a schedule is. You know, even when I played hockey, like, from a competitor standpoint, if you have to be in a gym 5 or 6 times a week, when I played hockey when I was 10 years old, we would be on the ice 4 and 5 times a week, whether it was games or practices. So that's like actually a pretty decent amount. That's more than like pretty much anybody who at my gym who's not a competitor trains 5 times a week. I mean, that's a lot. That's a busy training schedule. Outside of a professional athlete, that's like if you're a hobbyist or have a job or have a family and you train 5 times a week, you are a very, very lucky person.
Yeah. So, man, I'm curious, how did you, because you were born in Canada, right? So how did you end up in the States?
So where I was born in Canada is really close to the U.S. It's honestly like half-hour drive. So growing
Okay.
up in the county outside of the city of Windsor, it's a 30-minute drive, 30-minute drive, depending on where you want to get into the city. It was also a 30-minute drive from the border, and then Detroit is literally the next city over.
Mhm.
If you stand on one side of the bridge, it almost looks like when you're standing on the water, you could like maybe throw a stone and hit the other side. You obviously couldn't, but
Okay.
it's very close. It's a stone's throw away. So, oftentimes growing up, it was normal to drive over to Detroit with the family for, brunch on Sunday, or to hit the mall on the weekend, or to catch a game, or to catch a show, anything like that. So, turned into when I started training jujitsu, it was easy to kind of expand out within the same association that I was in and see there is a gym in Detroit that's just 10 minutes driving further than what I was already doing, in the same, it's just a different country, which is a kind of a weird thought, but it was
Mhm.
pretty normal to us growing up as a border city.
Why do you think maybe you start to excel in jujitsu as a young kid, and then you've had success pretty much throughout the belt ranks, all the way to black belt. Like, what do you think it was about you besides the coachability that maybe allowed you to really do well in jujitsu?
I think it's a few different things. I don't know if I can just put my finger on just one thing specifically. I think I was good at it. Like when I came to the gym, I was well coordinated. I was, easy to coach. I was interested in it. I really liked it. I had a really good first class. I had really good first experience. So I think a lot of things just clicked really well, and that kind of got the ball rolling like that. But I think the biggest thing about it was I was passionate about it. I truly enjoyed it. I truly liked it. I really like to practice it. I really like to spar. I really like to learn and study. And then once I competed, I loved it 10 times more. I loved competing. Competing was like the thing I loved the most. So it was, excuse me, it was really easy for me to flourish because I truly enjoyed it. I truly loved it. You know what I mean? It's something, and still to this day, it's something I truly enjoy. So I think that's a big reason why I flourish. I can use all my attributes and put a lot of time into this and really focus on improving because I truly like doing it and I truly like what I do.
Mhm. Yeah.
Was there a particular time where you were like, man, like, because again, a lot of us say we get into it, especially if you're passionate about it when you're young. A lot of us sort of start to daydream. I mean, I was daydreaming about it when I was younger about, man, I would love to do this full time. I'd love to be able to just train and teach or work out, whatever it is, and be able to make this a full time thing. When did you start having that? When did you sort of make that jump? We'll say it that way. Obviously you may have never had a normal job or anything like that because you got into it pretty young. But when did you say, like, all right, I'm going to go all in on this stuff and I'm going to do this full time, and this is what I'm going to put my eggs in? All my eggs are going to go in this basket for right now.
Honestly, like the daydream started probably like 6 months in, you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like once hockey was pretty well done by then, like 6 months into training jujitsu, and then I could like do it 3 and 4 and 5 times a week, like I really wanted to, mainly 4 times a week, to be honest. After hockey was done, instead of like, you know, kind of here or there. So probably by the time I was like 13, the daydream started. I like verbalized it, but my parents were like, "All right, school, obviously, and
For sure.
many other things. But when I was in 10th grade, the beginning of 10th grade or the middle of 10th grade, I won the PANS, the
Hmm.
juvenile one at PANS.
Hmm.
And that was when I said I want to do jujitsu, and I actually had a little bit of like weight behind what I said, even though I couldn't drop out of high school or, not do anything like that, which my parents never would have let me do. I could at least say like I could prove that I was good enough. Like at the
Sure.
time, I was like one of the best in the world. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
by then, that's when I could start to kind of work, because when you're young you have to really work with the people around you. You really, at least how I grew up, you really couldn't say or do shit without your parents and your family's kind of agreement and support of it. I couldn't just be like, I'm going to do jiu-jitsu for my whole life, and they were like, not a shot, you know what I mean? But they were
Yeah.
like, yeah, for sure, like here's like how you could do it, or here's how we could kind of like set it up or make it happen. So yeah, I'd say after that, I was like all in on it. It was like 100% what I wanted.
And how did that happen? So, because I know that at some point you ended up in Ohio. I don't know where you're at right now, but I know for like
Ohio,
a
yeah.
okay, because like I know for a long time, like you were in Ohio, and I always thought you were from Ohio until like I remember I was watching one of your matches like that ended up in a super fight, and they were like from Canada. I was like Canada. I thought he was from Ohio, because for the longest time it's where I've known you from. Did you go to Ohio? Was that like to pursue jujitsu? Did you get like a little gig there, or was that with your family, or what? Like, I guess what I'm wondering is like, how did you like? At what point did you actually make the transition to like, all right, you're done with high school. I'm going all into this stuff as a full-time gig now, and this is all I'm going to do.
Yeah, I went to the University of Windsor originally, and I
Hmm.
was training full time in Detroit. So I'd go to school, and then I would just like cross the border from school over to Detroit, or I would like have time to go back home and then drive back out again.
Got it.
And at that point in time, half-assing school and kind of honestly half-assing your career jiu-jitsu is not really like a good route to go. So I felt like I wasn't really getting where I should have gotten. Felt like I wasn't getting, really wasn't getting anything out of school, to be honest, because you
Hmm.
can't take like a half course load and not really have your mind there and think you're going to get something out of it. So wasn't really getting anything out of school, wasn't getting as much as I could have out of jiu-jitsu. So had a thought and some plans to go elsewhere, to like move to another team or to do anything like that. And Ohio was meant to be just kind of like a stopover, where I came to a place that I was familiar with, that I had trained at before, that I had friends here, and I had a good setup as a gym to teach and a gym to train. But as soon as I arrived, I was like, man, why don't we do it here? You know what I mean? It felt good to be close to home still. It felt good to be with people who I knew and were pretty established with. So it just kind of built from there, and I never left. Came to Toledo in 2015,
Yeah.
and been here ever since. Going to be 9 years in July.
Okay. Nice.
How important is that, like for moving or choosing a gym and things like that? Like how important is that community and how do you feel like is like the ideal like gym environment for you that's kind of conducive to learning and growing athletes and also being high level yourself as a competitor?
Yeah, one thing that's been a little bit of a thing with me is it hasn't really been a time in my career as a competitor that I've had a large training room. It's always been a small training room. It's always been like train with really good people. I've trained with a lot of really good people, but I have never trained with like a big room of really good people for any kind of like extended period of time. It's always been 10, honestly, like 10 or less people in a room. So really with me is, my goal is to have a strong like core group of people that as my competitors that are there to train and do this full time. I don't focus on having like the biggest room, but I want to have good numbers, good bodies in the room. But I focus on having that core of 6 to 10 people who are really, really solid, and that's kind of like the backbone of the team. So
Mm.
for me now, going from somewhere where typically I was just training or having people in to train or training with my students and my teammates, now I'm also doing that, but I have a team of guys who I'm really bringing up and building to be the backbone of this gym, so that when I'm done, eventually I'm going to be done one day competing. I don't want to be the guy who goes master six and does this until he's like 60 years old. I really, once I'm done, I want to make it to my 40s. Once I do that and I say I'm done, I'm done. I'm not doing this stuff anymore. 100% to coaching, 100% to the guys that are here. So bringing these guys up with me and building them as the backbone of this gym, the backbone of this team is going to set me up for that in the future.
Nice. And then I'm curious because obviously you're a super high level guy in jiu-jitsu. So, you might have some guys in there that are very like competitive with you, but I'm sure a lot of times you're rolling also too with people that aren't at the same level as you. How do you train with those people that you can go with tit for tat to get a lot out of it? And then how do you train with the lower belts or the lower skilled people that, you could probably work over if you wanted to? How do you train with those groups to try to get the most from your training?
So if you guys have consistency in your room and when you're
Mhm.
training, you're typically training with those people, like your main people. When it's a room
Mhm.
of 6 to 10 people, everybody's kind of like your main training partner, I guess you could say. You start to know those people really well. You
Mhm.
start to know what they do. You start to know their um, what things they're good at, what things they're not good at, and then you can shape the training around that. Like for example, somebody who's not very good at jujitsu overall might have really good back control, might have really good, I don't know, might be a really hard guy to like sweep or put down, or might be a good wrestler. He might just be horrible at jujitsu. Like no, I've had people in the room who know zero jujitsu, none whatsoever, but they're like some of the best training partners because you can't take them down, you can't hold them down. In ADCC rules, you could never score on them, to be
Got
honest.
it.
So yeah, it's like you just use everybody for what they have. Their like strongest ability matching up to your weakest ability. It doesn't take them being very high level to be able to give you some good work. And then
Mhm.
when you know everybody that you have in the room, you can build the training to help increase everybody's weaknesses, which is kind of, it's kind of the mindset around strength and conditioning, is kind of the mindset around teaching people jujitsu. It should be the same thing with your training and how you structure your training. It should be to help those core people in the room, those people who are the competitors. Again, talking about a comp training scenario here, but to bring those people up and have them, improve on their weaknesses.
What's like for you guys maybe getting prepped for a tournament, whether it's IBJJF or even like ADCC is obviously a bigger deal. It depends on the tournament, of course. But like, what's kind of a typical training camp, and is that going to fluctuate a little bit based on the tournament? Like the rule set, you might adjust it. But what's like a typical training camp look like as far as if you're incorporating strength conditioning and then also kind of mat time and just drilling and things like that?
Yeah, typically I try and have a comp training session Monday through Friday in the mornings. That's the main training session. And then we do one more session throughout the day. How that session is kind of structured is going to be different depending on what we have coming up. Like you said, with ADCC, there's going to be different things that are like heavily focused on that wouldn't be focused on in IBJJF. For example, in ADCC, if you get taken down and you go to the turtle, it's no points. You get taken down, you go to the turtle in the IBJJF, it's points. So, using ADCC takedown or ADCC wrestling training for an IBJJF rule set is literally counterproductive. So it all
Mhm.
kind of depends on the makeup of those sessions, depending on what me or the guys have coming up.
Yeah, the turtle and the ADCC is like if you like there's a few strategies that are really important with like ADCC, and one of them is knowing how to both attack and how to use the turtle. Because I mean, whether it's a pass, a takedown, anything, the turtle just negates the points. I mean,
Yeah.
that was your match with, what was it, Mika? Like you shot that beautiful takedown, and like I mean, I was like,
The 20, yeah.
22,
Yep,
right?
yep.
Yeah.
It was like, I mean,
We
I
thought you had points,
I
right?
was cheering for points, but I was cheering for you, but then they didn't give it to it, so whatever.
Yeah.
Is that like a rule that you like or do you hate, or like maybe for ADCC is there a rule that you would change or rules that you would change like to make it maybe a better for the competitors, even better for the viewers? I mean, probably competitors number one, but like what is there a rule set you change?
As far as a points rule set, I really like ADCC as far as how they have the points like kind of structured. Their point scoring system. I like it. I like the beginning of the match being zeros across the board and not really having the same emphasis on scoring or dominant position, more so kind of like that's where you give the time for people who are going to like landslide victory, people to submit people, and attack and open up. And then there's a shorter amount of time to be strategic, which is good. I think with a lot of rule sets, when you have 10 and 20 minutes of points, you start to play the rules a little bit more, and there's a lot more strategy behind when to go and when not to go. When you only have 5 minutes to score, people are going to open up a lot more and take a lot more risk, especially considering that if they don't win the match, they have to go to an overtime where it's, even it's the same, it's 5 minutes with points, but it's even different. So there are negatives and different things like that. So yeah, I do think ADCC is a really good rule set. As far as things I would change, I don't know. One thing I would change is I think sometimes when the matches go like, and this comes down to some of the officiating, I would say at some of the opens, is like when the matches go completely off the mat for no apparent reason. Sometimes
Yeah.
they can sometimes I think they can reset them a little sooner. um but I think that's something that's more of a problem at the ADCC opens than it is at the ADCC worlds, because ADCC worlds is like a lot bigger mat space, a
Bigger
lot
mat
different
space.
mat
Yeah.
space. It's even different mats. It's even like straight to Tommy mats. So there is even more grip. There is even some more, there is just more ability to stay on the mat or within the mats kind of general area more so. Whereas in the
Mm.
ADCC Open, there's nothing like seeing two dudes just like truck across 6 fucking mats and not get
Yeah.
stopped. You know what I
Well,
mean? So
dude, and I think you're right about that. I think like I was saying it at this one at the recent West Coast trials, because I watched a dude get taken down, and he got his bell rung, right? He was like, but the dude was a Bellator fighter, whatever. He wasn't like, and he was winning the match like 10-0 or something. And like the guy like pushed into him, and he like fell, and he hit his head off the mats, like on that, basically on carpet, on concrete. And he got up, and you could tell his bell was rung. And I'm like, man, one day someone's gonna get like gonna get really bashed in, you get like suplex or something off the mats, and it's gonna be like, all right, guys, we need either make these mats bigger, we got to stop them. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of that rule. But I'm kind of with you. I'm like, I think they need to probably do something about that. It would be good.
yeah.
I'm curious about with your training. Do you do a lot of drilling, or are you just more of like a lot of rolling, situational rolling, like live work, or some sort of mixture of the two?
I don't live train that much, to be honest. Like live rounds, and maybe do like, um, I don't know, I'd probably do a little more now, but like 15 rounds a week of like live training, maybe.
Okay.
Everything else is pretty well just like I do drills, but everything else is specific rounds, I would say. So starting in certain positions, certain kind of, you know, specific training,
Yeah,
however
specific to the
however you want to
situation.
do it. Everybody has different names for it, or everybody has different descriptions of it, I
Different
guess.
branding,
But
right? Right.
yeah, it's kind of just like, you just pick a specific position, or you make specific rules around what you're doing, and you train. You're training. It's
Yeah.
kind of just like, it's a better way to roll for me with the partners that I have. It's a better way for me to roll for the partners specifically with what
Mhm.
they have coming up, and it's a better way to hone in on kind of what needs to be adjusted or what needs to be trained and focused on, rather than just doing live rounds. So that's what I
Mhm.
tend to follow.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's funny going back to like the jiu-jitsu guys kind of being kind of nerdy guys. Like sometimes like in jiu-jitsu you'll see like a bunch of different branded names. Like some guys like I came up with this whole thing, whatever. And I'm like, it's like we did that in wrestling. It's just like you're just doing situational work, or like sparring from a certain position. This is like
Yeah.
we've been doing this for a long time, like
Right.
but they got to give it like some cool name or something that they cooked up. So
What about like strength conditioning? Like, is there a certain type of, first of all, how important is that for your style and maybe for your success in jujitsu?
As far as lifting, I think lifting is extremely important for any style, you know what I mean? I know, you said for my style, but I think lifting is super important for any style, especially because the biggest thing about it and the biggest thing that you're going to need out of strength training is the injury prevention. So injury prevention is the biggest thing, and injury prevention is the thing I think you get from it no matter what. And a lot of people see my lifting and they see the numbers I'm doing are typically higher than a lot of the numbers they see, especially pound for pound from grappling athletes. And they think because they do less that their strength training is different, when honestly their strength training, we can kind of all do the same type of things. You might not be able to do the same kind of volume that I do, given that I've done this for so long, but just because we don't use the same numbers doesn't mean we can't do the same workouts, the same type of workouts, and we're going to get benefits from it if we use the proper numbers and percentages. We give our bodies the adequate time to recover, and we eat and sleep and do all the things that we should be doing. We will get crazy amount of benefits out of strength training. And I think number one is always injury prevention.
Do you like tailor that like based on like if there's a do you do the same type of lifting like all the time, or do you like to vary it up? Or if you're getting closer to like a tournament, do you kind of, obviously the volume might decrease, but like is there a certain type of lifting or maybe something you think really helps jiu-jitsu specifically?
For me, I'm going to be biased because I literally train at Westside Barbell, but
Yeah.
conjugate method has been something that I have followed and what I do follow. And the thing that I think has worked the best for me, 100% has worked the best for my guys. And I think it is, you know, far superior to many other programs that I have seen other people advertising or other people kind of getting behind. And the reason I think that is it is a great system, it is a great program, and this is outside of West Side's specific expertise, which I'll get into. But with just the conjugate method, if you use it properly, you can kind of build it any way you want. It's kind of a pretty general idea when you look at it pretty plainly. You kind of just build it any way that you want to build it. There's not a whole lot of rules as to how to do it, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's pretty easy to build your own program through the conjugate method. And it's really easy for a lot of other programs to say they're doing something different when they're just kind of constructing a program with a lot of the same principles. You know what I mean? So it's really, it's tried and true. It's very effective. And being at Westside, you're just with people who have the most experience that I've been able to find and come across with not just strength training, but strength training for athletes and with athletes. You know, the amount of data they have and the amount of proof they have to support why their program and why their exercise routines and their, you know, changing of exercises and their waves of volume and their programming patterns, why it's all works so well and why it's all super effective. They have so much science, so much data behind that. So, you know, they're people that are really easy to trust.
You were talking about injury prevention. I'm curious because obviously you've been competing for a fairly long time now and at a high level. Have you had any like serious injuries that you've had to have operated on or anything like that?
Touch wood, no operations,
Okay.
but serious injuries, yeah, a significant amount, I'm sure. I mean, I haven't had a labrum in my right shoulder, left shoulder. Actually, I haven't had a labrum in my left shoulder for quite some time. I shouldn't say I don't have a labrum. I mean, I guess I do have a labrum, but I have a labrum tear that, you know, is not going to fix itself because it's torn. But
Yeah.
I have done a lot for it. I've done a lot with it. And seems like something as far as like till now and now is something that I can push through for quite a while. When I say push through, it's not something that I'm like limping through. I have good strength in it and everything is doing well, but you know, I know one day it's going to need to be operated on. It's just something I'm
Putting off.
holding out on or putting it off. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, no, I get it.
That's probably my most major one.
Yeah, I was just curious because I've noticed just from like talking with so many darn people and like just knowing guys for years, like I tend to notice this trend where guys who are really consistent with their lifting, for like years, you know, not just like, okay, there's a camp rolling around, I need to start lifting weights, but guys who just like lift consistently year round, they tend to get less injuries from what I've noticed. Like even like some of my buddies who have been training and they're in their like 50s and stuff like that, who always lift no matter what. Obviously they're like, you know, you understand this, the weight's going to come down as you get older, but they're still lifting. And they, like I said, knock on wood and whatever, like they tend to get injured a little bit less. And so I think there's probably something there going back to the injury prevention for people. You know, lifting is a good thing for you, not just for the gym, but also just to keep your damn body together. It kind of acts like the glue that sort of allows you to get out there and rough yourself up during training and not take too much damage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's the truth. I mean, it's when done properly, it's strengthening your body when you know, take that under a microscope. You're strengthening tendons, you're strengthening muscle fibers, you're strengthening tissue, you're growing tissue. You know, you're doing things that even though I have something that doesn't function very well and that I have a torn labrum, I'm able to build up muscle around my scapula, my upper delt, my rear delt, and my trap to be able to make up for the damage that I have to the front of the shoulder capsule. And I'm still able to have it be 100% functioning and working properly. And, you know, for the most part, I know I'm talking about a lot, so something's probably going to go wrong, but for the most part, you know, no pain and, you know, not a crazy amount of discomfort. You know, the only way I can do that is by, you know, building up the supporting muscles and the supporting tissue around that joint.
Yeah. The one thing I'll add to that is that, you know, you're not going to stop all injuries. But the other thing that you kind of shared a really good point is that you can decrease the severity of an injury. So somebody that was a lot weaker or doesn't have good strength in their shoulder, that labral tear could have been much worse, or their function could have been much less. So by not just, first of all, you're building up your body, strengthening up the muscles, the tendons, supportive tissue, you're decreasing maybe the severity that the injury could potentially be, and your ability to work through it or kind of work with it. I say, when I even work through, but work with it, like allow those muscles around that shoulder or around your body to kind of like help support and still function at a high level and compete at a high level. So like, you know, you can see certain injuries in different people. They'll look the same, but people will function differently. And that's like, you know what I mean? Like you may have the same injury as somebody else, but because they don't have the strength conditioning you have, they can't function like you can. And so that's a huge thing. And like Chewy, you mentioned that consistency, that building up your body is just more resilient, which I think, you know, at your stage, you know, where you're at, been at this high level for such a long time. It's, I mean, 4 months or even a month off the mats is, you know, if you've got the training camp that you have to be a part of, that's huge. That's huge time lost. And you don't want to do that.
I mean, honestly, for me, I have myself set up in a way that I can't really do that. You know what I mean? And that's kind of the way that I want it. I've always enjoyed lifting. Like if I didn't do jujitsu, I would probably be into lifting more. I would probably be a lot bigger than I actually am now. You know what I mean? I can't be as much of a meathead as I kind of want to be sometimes. So I really do enjoy lifting. You know, when you're an athlete, a lot of times the workouts you do, you don't enjoy. You know, I'm not going to make any bones about it. There are a lot of parts of like my lifting during the week that I'm like, fuck, you know what I mean? I don't want to do that stuff. And, you know, probably I know it's good for me, but there are a lot of things that I probably wouldn't do if I was just recreational. But, you know, there's always those people that kind of suffer through lifting and that kind of training in the gym that's not on the mat. You know, that's never been the case for me. I've been fortunate enough to really, really enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I remember when I was in my like lifting. I just love lifting. Like getting up in the morning, getting a lift in before I do anything else in the day is like my favorite thing, right? Like I feel like I'm just better off for the whole day with it. And I remember when I was in my like mid 20s, early 20s, whatever. I remember I went like straight meathead. I got up to like 255. I was all sauced up and was like doing like powerlifting and strongman and stuff. And I was doing like, I remember there was like a buddy of mine who was training for like the Highland Games where you do the caber tosses and stuff. And I was just like, let's fucking do it. Yeah. And then I remember like trying to like roll around and I'm just, because you're carrying around just so much tissue and so much weight. I was like, all right, it needs oxygen, it needs blood. Yeah, it's like I can't live two worlds. It's like I got to choose one. I either got to be all into MMA and jiu-jitsu or I gotta like get rid of this tissue, or I've got to like be all into lifting. And I'm while I was strong, I wasn't that strong.
Yeah.
So I was like, let's steer it back over here. So I appreciate that, like wanting to be a meathead, but maybe you can't be as much of a meathead as you
It's
are.
a sweet spot, right?
Yeah.
You got to have that sweet
Exactly.
spot.
Also, too, by the way, Eugene's a physical therapist. I don't know if you know, because like as soon as you were talking about the labral tear, he like kind of like started leaning forward. He's like, let's talk about this stuff.
I enjoy it.
No, I know.
I enjoy like
You enjoy how the body works.
I enjoy listening to like you just kind of, and you're at, one of the probably the best gyms in the world, like where Louis Simmons was and all I mean, there's so much research. I've done some like, do you do any kind of joint training like FRC? Have you ever heard of that? Because I know you've got a guy over there. Who do you work
John
with out there?
John Quint's like my guy. John Quint.
Yes.
I always joke with John Quint saved me from the operating table before ADCC, like the month before I re-inflamed my shoulder. I don't know how. I had like a small separation in my right shoulder, which was like my good one. Like just random tournament, posted on somebody, hit my arm, shoulder kind of dislocated, was a problem. Met with John. I was like convinced. I did everything that I could before ADCC. I was convinced after ADCC, I was like, I'm either going to go do stem cells or I'm going to get surgery. Like it's going to have to be one or the other. It just hurts. And John, I don't know, he might tell you this if you ever talk to him, if anybody ever asked him about me. But John said that I had the worst shoulder mobility of anybody he's ever seen in his life. So
yeah.
And he does all the people in the NFL, all the people that play all these other sports that like, full contact sports with, some of the scariest people in the world. So for me to have the worst shoulders he's ever seen, that was pretty bad. It was pretty embarrassing, honestly. But his work really saved me, man. It really got me a lot of mobility. It really allowed me to do a lot more and kind of made me realize that my problem was the stagnation, was being stagnant and not moving that joint, that space that builds up in your joint kind of starts to seize up. And then you start to feel those issues, the labrum tear, the bone spur, and like the, whatever, you probably know the term better than I do, but when you separate your shoulder, you get this like
AC
little
joint.
like calcification on your joint. You get it on the other end of your collarbone. It's really painful to the touch, but when you start to open up your shoulder more, you start to feel it less and less. That bone, the joint's not grinding anymore. It's not catching on anything. So,
I've done.
It's definitely something you have to keep up with. I remember I had another injury. I had an injury middle of last year that I kind of focused on rehabbing that. It was a muscle tear, so I focused on rehabbing that. And then like after 3 weeks, I was like, holy shit, man, my shoulders are hurting again because I wasn't doing as many exercises or as much, specific work on my shoulders again. I was like, fuck, man, my shoulders are hurting again. So it's something you have to stay up on for sure.
You got to do the maintenance work. And I've done, I don't know, like John does a lot of the FRC, like the joint training. And I've done like, he's ran like a couple of the classes, maybe 2 or 3. I've done like the functional range conditioning and then internal strength model and some stuff. He's taught a couple of the courses. So I haven't spoken to him directly, but I've learned from him directly, and he's super knowledgeable and big dude as well. And does a lot of, he's a big guy. And like, I know he'll probably put you in some of these positions, in these like almost like Kimura Americana positions, have you resist him and do some end range strengthening and stuff. Yeah. And it's the stuff kind of utilizing that kind of training, that specific joint training is just another like adjunct to the weightlifting. It allows you to lift better. Number one, gives you full mobility, more access to range of motion, more access to more strength. And so that stuff, I work with a lot of jiu-jitsu athletes. And I think it's so important, the joint training, like the specific joint focused training, besides, the combined just lifting weights as well. I mean, both of those things together is really important. And John's super knowledgeable, so I can attest to that. I know he knows what he's doing. He's really good.
You have to show up to, you can't do any of the training, especially with everything that I've gone through being at Westside. Well, the one thing I've learned and realized the most is just showing up with intent. It's really easy to show up with intent to when you train jiu-jitsu. It's really easy to show up with intent when you fucking drill or do what you want to do or what's easy, but it's hard to show up with intent to something like lifting when lifting has really nothing to do with jujitsu. You know, it does not make you better at jujitsu whatsoever. Specifically, like lifting to jujitsu, it doesn't make you any better at jujitsu. So it's really hard to like show up at some point down the line or while you're doing it and just not want to just go through the motions, you know.
Yeah.
It's difficult and it's hard to really show up with that same kind of passion, that same kind of energy. But, you know, I know if I don't show up to my workouts at Westside with intent, if I don't show up with, you know, my head screwed on right, I honestly won't make it through the workout or have a successful workout to log. So I know I need to show up with the right intent and with some intention, you know, just the way I show up to training. If I'm going to have a hard training day or a hard sparring day in jiu-jitsu, I need to show up, you know, mindset and everything peaking right. Whereas, you know, a lot of times when you lift, you can just kind of go through it blind. So it's not really like that.
That's right. With your lifting, one last question I have about it is that, you know, there's a lot of stuff, like you said, there's a lot of programs out there on the internet. And, you know, I've seen people where they'll say, you know, you got to lift specifically for jiu-jitsu, whatever. What do you think about this? Like, do you, like when you go into the gym, are you lifting? Do you have specific lifts that you think are for jiu-jitsu, or do you simply just try to strengthen your body like all around and then let your technique, you know, develop itself in the gym? Like, how do you go about it with the lifting?
Yeah, I think the thing about like specifically lifting for just jujitsu is like doing something specifically because you know or you think that that movement makes you better at jujitsu. I think that's like the biggest sham in the world, to be
Yeah.
honest. I
I'm with
think
you.
that's
Yeah.
like it's such like it's like the biggest crock, man. You know, I think with strength training specifically, I think you really need to have it be completely separate from jujitsu because it's not jujitsu. It's not meant to be jujitsu. It's meant to be something to strengthen you and make you kind of harder to kill and make your body stronger. You know what I mean?
Sure.
That is what it is. So, you know, it does not share that with jujitsu. It doesn't share any kind of technique or movement patterns with jujitsu that are going to make you better at jujitsu. It's going to make your body more, you know, able to do things that you probably couldn't do previously, but that's not because of jujitsu. Like you're lifting to like get your body right because jujitsu fucks it up. So you can't really like blend them together and just expect it to like be okay or think, you know, because yoga is a lot like jujitsu, that yoga can take the place of strength training and things like that. Whereas like, no, yoga is recovery. You know, yoga is literally recovery. Yoga is not a workout, it's recovery. So if you want to implement yoga 3 times a week, that's fine, but that doesn't mean you can't strength train. You know, it doesn't take the place of that.
That's right. Yeah, I'm the same way. I see a lot of like, you know, and this has been going on for like a long time now, but like quote functional fitness, you know, and people trying to mimic their sport with lifting. And you know, again, from my experience, you know, just like simply you develop your body with the lifting all around. So you got a strong ass body, and then you take that thing and then you go develop skill with it and see what you can do with it.
Yeah, correct. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing and the thing that Tom, who's, you know, head coach over at Westside at this point, told me, and it was one of the things that when he told me, I was like, it really made sense to me, was he said, we're not trying to make you better at your sport. We're trying to give you all the tools you need so you can develop more skill and in turn become a better athlete.
Right.
And I thought that was a really good way of being able to say it. I thought that was a really easy way. It was really easy for me to like take that and be like, damn, okay, he's right, you know?
It's
And
like skills versus attributes.
correct. Yes.
Right.
So yeah, he gave me the rundown about it like that. You know, and he's a great coach. He's a great mind. So the more that we talk to each other, the more we kind of learn about where we're coming from. You know, he can kind of learn more about my sport and the ins and outs and the intricacies of my sport that he might not have known by talking to me, and then I can understand where he's at as a strength coach. Neither one of us are trying to like take over each other's roles. Neither one of us is trying to like, you know, I don't come in the gym and I'm like, I'm gripping a lot when I, you know, do jujitsu, so we should do some more gripping exercises. Or, you know, he doesn't come in and tells me what he thinks a movement should be that we include for jujitsu. Like it's kind of a thing where the athlete who is the expert in his field comes in and works with alongside a strength coach who is an expert in his field. And, that's how I think we get that really, sweet camaraderie that works well.
I want to kind of ask you about just accomplishments in jiu-jitsu. Like, is there like what's maybe kind of been like so far? Like what's been one of your maybe like your proudest achievements on the mats? Like what's something you've accomplished on the mats you really were excited about? And then kind of moving forward, with ADCC coming up, you're going to be competing. Like what's your kind of idea about competing at ADCC this year?
The main goal is always to win ADCC. I think that's number one. That's been number one since I started the sport. It's been number one since I was in like 8th grade. It's been the number one thing I've wanted to do, and it's still in the number one spot for me. Going into this year, it's no different than the other years. I want to win that tournament. I've been getting 4th and 3rd, so hopefully it's not a second this time. We kick the door in and we finish it out. So that'll be the goal. And if I win this year and I win next year and I win next year, this year, and then I win in 2026 and I win in 2028, the goal in 2030 would be to win again. ADCC is always going to be, as far as right now, ADCC is the ultimate. Winning ADCC is the ultimate thing. It's the most legit tournament. It's the biggest tournament. So yeah, that's number one, and will be number one whether I have no wins or 3 wins in that event. So alongside with that, I want to win more world titles. I want to win more PANS championships, more super fight titles, make my way over to any major super fight promotion and win a title. The only one I'm missing right now is Polaris and one. I've literally won super fight titles in all the major organizations like past and present. I've won PANS and worlds, whole bunch of things. It's hard to say what one is like the most special to me because they all have a unique experience now when I look back on them. Given that I've kind of done this sport for a while, it's when I look back on each one of them, I have a special memory or a special feeling attached to it. My first black belt world title was something very special because it's kind of like, all came to fruition right there, almost 14 years after I started, 13 years after I started training, I was able to say I'm officially an adult black belt world champion. But, then it all starts again and there's more tournaments right after, and it's a new year, and it's, Nogi Worlds at the end of the year is like as soon as you go through Christmas and New Year's, you wake up and it's the next year and, it's all new again. So yeah, it's hard to say what won. Last year I won Nogi PANS at super heavy. That was kind of
How much did you weigh at the time?
I weighed like 171 pounds or 172 pounds, maybe. Yeah, I wasn't very big. I had a match planned that kind of fell through. So I was training and I was active. So I was like, what am I going to do? I didn't really want to do PANS if I would have done lightweight or middleweight. I didn't look at the bracket and was like, oh man, that'd be really cool to do. But when I looked at super heavy, I was like, this is a really tough division. There were 2 or 3 past world medalists there. There was a brown belt world champ who got his black belt, who was really good. There was, like Devontae Johnson's a world champion. Elliot Kelly's placed before. Philippe Trovo placed. Cassio, the guy who won Brazilian ADCC trials this year, he was in there. Like a bunch of people. It was like just a crazy tough division. And there was only like 10 people signed up. So like your chances of fighting good people right off the get was very high, which isn't that way with lightweight or middleweight. It's always like there's like 40 people, there's 4 really good guys, and they could all be on like one side of the bracket. You know what I mean? So it kind of excited me. It was kind of like, this is going to be really challenging to go against these bigger, stronger dudes. And it's also going to be really cool because there's like a lot of matches in there. I'm going to get, really, really notable wins if I get in there. So it motivated me, got me going, made me really want to be there. So that's what did it.
And with those matches, is there anything that you think like with your game works really well against big guys? Because obviously, usually like people are cutting weight, right, to get down to a lower weight class. You're going up in a weight class and you're just going on at your walking weight. Is there something with your game that you think works well against big guys?
Few things. I think I'm physically strong, so I don't get like injured against them. Like if
Mhm.
they like plop on me or anything like that, which is typically how a smaller athlete would get hurt against a bigger one, is like
Yeah.
just their pressure, their when they go to hit like a quick switch pass or go to move side to side and they like kind of like collide with each other. That's when they're typically going to get hurt. It's not really from submissions necessarily. So, I'm quite physically strong, so I thought my physical strength could kind of allow me to not get broken down by them over the course of a tournament.
Hmm.
And then my guard is really, really good. Combined with my physical strength and my wrestling, I'm able to sweep bigger people. I'm
Hmm.
able to actually like put them down and hold them down and score on them, which is a rare thing. Typically with smaller people beating big people, they just like try and, especially in the IBJJF, score a couple advantages, try and kind of like play guard retention or like push people away for the remainder of the match, which I have the guard retention to be able to keep a guard against almost anybody. So, if I can sweep them, I can score on them. I cannot get scored on back because, typically my top game is my strong suit. And if I can use my guard to score against them, then, it pays off. So it's just kind of like my game just becomes kind of a good mix. I guess it's a good mix for, 155 and 170, 185, and I guess it's a good mix for like 220. So,
You know,
in the course of 2023, I fought in like 7 different weight classes.
well, I think you have like your style's a nightmare, especially for big guys, because if you're strong enough that you can not get completely overpowered, you've got good guard retention and you're pretty flexible for like your level of strength, right? Like your guard, like you have good like flexible hips and you can move around pretty well in your lower body. So like you said, you have a good guard retention, which that's a pain in the butt for big guys because big guys typically you'll find them every now and then, but it's rare, right? Like the heavier weight classes, you typically don't run into that as much. Guys
Hmm.
typically don't have that level of flexibility, and they don't have the speed, right? So again, you're faster, but you're still strong, and you're more flexible, and you've got really like loose, flexible hips. That's a pain in the butt to deal with as a big guy, and so you probably you can wear out those big guys, and then when they're basically tiring out from trying to pass your damn guard, then it becomes easier for you to sweep you and you come in for the attack.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I agree. I think the being smaller too, I think gives a little bit of an advantage because typically when you're talking about super heavy, you're talking about guys who's 6'2", 6'3", 6'4". That's, a lot of long limbs there. So it's easier for me to get legs and hands and
Mm,
frames inside.
get your
It's a lot
entries.
harder.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a lot harder for them to shut that down. So that is another kind of like hurdle they have to overcome.
Makes sense.
Mm. Is there anything kind of coming up through your career so far? Anything that maybe you would tell your younger self? I like asking this question. I'm just curious. Anything you would have done different that you think could have maybe made helped you improve faster, or maybe something that maybe you did that was really beneficial? You could go kind of either way.
Mm, um, Yeah, I don't know. That question, it's a good question. I always think of like a different answer, or change my answer every time I hear it, to
Hmm.
be honest, because sometimes you think about something, you have a realization about something, or you truly learn something. People say they learn things, but they don't really learn things. They think they learn it. It takes years to really be like, oh, this is why, people say that.
Hmm.
People don't learn things that quickly typically. So, the more that I go on, the more it's easier for me to be like, oh, well, I wish I would have known this or known that. But I think you almost have to start out in a way where you don't know anything. You have to have some trial by fire. I had a lot of trial by fire. I didn't have a lot of being led by the hand. I had a lot of like, go ahead and figure it out kind of thing. So, um, do I regret that? Not at all. I think it was great. It worked out great for me. But I think you can always listen more. I think even if you're a good student, even if you're somebody who wants to get good and listens to people around you, I think you can always listen more. I think you can always listen better. I wish I took more time to be a better listener, and that might not have anything to do with just jujitsu. It might have to do with me and my own personal struggles and my own personal like studies or ventures to get better at it. But I wish I learned how to become a better listener.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, I think at any age, you're right. I mean, I think as all of us could probably stand to. I think the more we listen, obviously the more you can learn and the more you can pick up
Well,
from.
I remember there
people.
was like the old timers when I was young, like the older guys. That's why, the older fellas would say something like, when you're a kid and you're just like jabbering off like you think you know everything. They're like, there's a reason why God gave you 2 ears and one mouth. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so you should be to listen more, right? So
Yeah,
I
Yeah.
think that's something we can all do better. That's something I'm terrible about sometimes because I talk so much for a living and I'm teaching so much for a living that like I've got to like remember just like shut the hell up sometimes and just like listen to what's going on rather than always like trying to like be in it.
Yeah, for sure. I think it is a struggle. It's a struggle for anybody who that I think it's a struggle for anybody who teaches, anybody who's an instructor. I think it's a struggle for anybody who has reached any kind of level of like expertise. I think you're always
Mhm.
going to struggle with getting out of the way of your own opinion and your own ego, even
Sure.
though I don't consider myself to be somebody who has I definitely don't have a fragile ego. I know I have a big one, but I definitely don't have a fragile one. I'm not going to get very upset if somebody says something about me or about what they don't like. I'm far from fragile, but it is always a struggle to get out of the way of the yeah, but kind of thought because
Mhm.
you know what you're talking about. A lot of times it's not the right reaction.
Yeah, and you said ego is like like if you're going to be a good competitor, you have to have an ego. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
you got
100%.
to be like someone will say, you're full of yourself. Like what are you going to be full of, right? Like if you're going to be a competitor, you kind of have to be full of yourself to some degree, like to where you believe in yourself. Otherwise, you can't go into the competition. Well, I'm here and I hope I do okay today. You got to know that you're a bad dude who can take care of business when you
yeah.
need
To
to.
be the best in the world, and you've been the best in the world, like at your weight class. I mean, for quite some time, and that's like
Yeah.
you got to think you're the best, right? You have to be like, I'm the shit. Like I'm the
Yeah.
guy. Like, and you have to be that way. I think if you don't think that way, you can't stay on top.
For sure, for sure. I think it comes down to it, and it comes down to like I've been ranked at the top of my division since 2019, so like 5 years in running now, you know what I mean? And that's rare in the sport that
Yep.
somebody's ranked that high for that long. I've shown no signs of like slipping or slowing down. I don't plan to. So, to stay there, you have to stay hungry, you have to stay motivated, but at the same time, you have to know that you belong there. And if you don't know you belong there, you should just look at like the evidence of what it is. Like, are you, ranked in the world? Are you recognized as the best in the world? You have to be honest about that sometimes. It's being honest with yourself. If you're have a ranking that you don't deserve or you feel like you don't deserve, whether it's because of your own personal issues or because you're actually not that good, then it's not really going to help you keep that spot or maintain the work ethic that you need to stay on top. It's going to be
Mhm.
detrimental to you.
Yeah. It's tough. I mean, from like people that are in your position, they say it's a lot harder to stay on top, than get to the top kind of thing. So, but it's a testament to man to you. You've been at it for 5 years at the number one at the highest level. So, congrats on that. And Chew, you got anything, man?
Now, brother, what do you got? Obviously, you got the ADCC coming up this year, but do you have anything else up? Any events or any other things that you're getting into coming up soon?
Yeah, coming up soon, I'm gonna try and just do a few tournaments, whether they're ADCC Opens or IBJJF Opens or super fights. I'm unclear on like what super fights are coming up, anything like that. But I want to do a few, I would say 2 to 3 tournaments before ADCC just to stay sharp and active. I feel like that's when I do my best and when I stay not crazy active, but pretty busy is when I have my best success in competition. So looking to stay active at these upcoming ADCC and IBJJF events.
Nice. And if anybody wants to follow up with you, train with you, whatever, where's the best place to find you?
If you want to get in touch with me on any of the social media, Facebook, Instagram, I always get back to you. If I don't get back to you right away, just send me a double message. I won't be offended. But I always get back to people on my social medias. I'm easy to find there. Just Dante Leon or Dante Leon BJJ. And anybody who wants to come train, everybody is welcome, man. You know, everybody's welcome to come train, especially competitors to come out, stay here, train as long as you want, is regardless of team or where you're from, you're always welcome.
What's your gym and where is it located?
Adamus Jiu-Jitsu. It's called Adamus Jiu-Jitsu in Toledo, Ohio.
What does that name mean?
Adamus is a Greek root word for diamond or untarnishable. So I thought it would be a solid name. It went along good with a mock-up of a logo that we made. It was like kind of like a Spartan helmet almost. So
Okay.
we thought it was a good fit. You know, everything kind of came together on it. We thought it was a good name. So diamond untarnished. Hopefully it can last long like those stones do.
That's right. That's cool.
Awesome, brother. Appreciate your time, man.
All right. Thank you.
So guys, thanks for listening. Thanks to you guys for being here. Also, I said I was going to give you like a short story about Dante and seeing him out.
Story time.
Yeah, story time with Chewy. So when we were at the East Coast trials, whenever I go to like a new city, the first thing I do is I map out coffee shops, a place to get like food after the tournament's over, and I map out a gym to go lift at if I'm not competing. And so I found a gym that I was going to lift at, and there was this one. It was like because we were in like Atlantic City. It was like 10 minutes away. There was a place called Wolf's Gym or something. And so they had this gym. It was like this little, gym on the second floor. And so I went up there and started lifting. And I went there I think we're there for 3 days. So I lifted each day that I was there. And on the second day, when I'm lifting, I was doing like a light leg lift day. Dante and Giancarlo come rolling through, and they were doing some deadlifts out on there was like this little patio area, but they're on the second floor. They're out there. And so they're loading up plates, and I'm in there like lifting or whatever. And the front desk guy comes up, and he walks outside while they're deadlifting. And, I'm thinking, okay, he's going to go out there and tell these guys, hey, man, you can't deadlift. Because, I mean, they're lifting some good weight. And, then he goes back or whatever. And then later on, like the same guy comes up to me and basically just lets us know, hey, like, while you guys are in town, apparently the owner is a jiu-jitsu guy. He's like, hey, man, you guys are free. We're going to refund your gym costs.
Cool,
and, just post something online for us or something. I was like, sure, no problem.
Sweet.
So afterwards, I talked to him. I was like, hey, like, was he telling you guys not to deadlift? They were like, no, we thought he was going to like stop us, but it was just, he wanted to like, let us know like, hey, thanks for being here kind of thing.
Sweet.
So anyway, that was like just random story, but I usually run into him or some other guys. And I think I've run into Giancarlo before at the gym. It's like, whenever I go to whatever gym's close to the venue, there's always like, whoever's not competing, there's always a bunch of guys just meatheading it up.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Lifting some weights. So anyway, that's it, guys. Thanks for being here on the podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. Again, there's lots of little tips there that you could take away. Several, like when I'm going through these, I'm typically writing down notes, not necessarily so that I can like remember stuff from like I know like I can keep a conversation going easy. It's mostly him. I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. Or I really like that idea. Yeah. Or it's something that I'll use in one of my emails or something. Cause it's like just a lot of good tips in that one. So for your training, for your lifting, everything else. And so again, listen to the podcast, find something that you like from that podcast with, one of the best in the world champion, and execute on that idea, right? It's usually the idea when we're talking to a guest is to say, hey, like, give me something, like, let me get some useful idea, and then let me sort of share that with people. So this way they can put it into practice. Cause that's really what we're doing the podcast for is like, I like talking to people that are out there and like figuring out how they work and how they get things done. And then, you guys get to listen to it as well. And then, so it's like, we're just trying to peel out like some training tips, ideas for training. How did you get to be here? And the idea is that you guys can listen to this, and instead of being like, oh, that was a fun podcast, go about your day, just pick like one thing, like pick one thing and run with it. Right. And maybe you're like, hey, it would be a really good idea to be a little bit more focused with my training. Right now, even if you're not a coach, you can say, hey, like, I'm going to just start making sure that when I roll, I'm trying to roll from certain positions. Or if I know this new white belt, maybe they wrestled before, but they can't play worth a crap off their back. Well, I'll let them, pin me in side control and see if I can escape it, right? To make my side control escapes better, as an example, right? So you can do that. Or maybe you're lifting, maybe you need to lift weights more. and understand that you're lifting weights. You don't have to make it super complicated. You don't have to be like, I've got to be following some super specific to jiu-jitsu functional fitness program. Just get your body strong. There's a million different programs to do that. You can do things like, obviously, the conjugate method Westside. I've used it before back when I was trying to get really freaking strong. It's great. But there's lots of different methods out there. But again, think about just building up your body, make it stronger over time. There's lots of little stuff that you get into, but regardless, just execute on something. And because one idea that's been well executed is worth more than 1,000 of them just sitting around in your head like, oh, that'd be a really good idea to do. Just do one thing. So anyway, thank you guys for being here. Hope you enjoyed the podcast with Dante. Fun guy, super nice dude, very skilled, and hopefully he does really well.
Yeah, he's got what, second and third, I guess.
Yeah, man, and I'm always cheering for him. He's fun to watch. He goes after it, and he's a humble, cool dude. Humble in the sense, like, not humble like I don't know, I'm okay. As we talked about in the podcast, right? He has an ego, but like, he's a good dude. So it's cool to have him on the podcast, and I wish him the best. So thank you guys for being here. Big thanks to our sponsors for helping make this podcast happen. If you guys want to support the podcast, you can check them out. Charlotte's Web CBD. Again, they make the premier CBD company that's out there. I feel like they're the one that's been around the longest that I can think of.
I can't think of any others.
I'm sure there are some, because it's not like I've really looked, but when I think of CBD, they were the first company out there. And it's like one of those things where when I first heard about CBD, it sounded like snake oil. I was like, yeah, right, dude. Like, it's supposed to do all these amazing things. Yeah, right. I started using it. I like the product, right? It's a good product. And again, if you guys want to try it out, you can get 30% off your order using the promo code JiuJitsu30 at checkout, whether it be the tinctures, the gummies, whatever you want to use. Also, thanks to our buddy Matt at Epic Roll, who supports the podcast. Again, if you guys are looking to get some new jiu-jitsu gear, he makes really good stuff. Rash guards, shorts, gis, hoodies, joggers, whatever you're looking for jiu-jitsu related, he's got it. And if you want to save 20% on the order that you get, use the promo code JiuJitsu20 at checkout at epicrollbjj.com. If you guys want to support the podcast directly, get an ad-free version of this podcast, also get access to an exclusive library of content we've been building for years that'll keep you busy for a long time, that has everything from obviously little snippets and interviews with people that we've had on the podcast to specific videos for jiu-jitsu, like a warm-up routine that Eugene's put together, seminars that I've recorded, different question and answer videos and rolling videos that have not been released on YouTube before. If you'd like to get access to all that at a very inexpensive price, you can do so by going to patreon.com/the Jiu-Jitsu podcast. And if you're already a patron member, you guys can also get preferential treatment and questions. So if you have a question pops out, we'll make a video for it directly here on the podcast, or we'll answer it on the podcast sometime when we're doing it. So if you have a question, you can throw it through the Patreon as well. And last but not least, guys, if you would like to join my Chew Crew group, my email group that is on my website, jiujitsu.net/join, JOIN. This will subscribe you to getting my daily email, where I go into everything from jiu-jitsu to philosophy to books to just anything and everything, basically the podcast, the YouTube, the whole thing. If you guys like the stuff, this is kind of the same stuff I go into. And I also send out usually there's like a weekly discount for one of my products in there. Not always, but sometimes, any of the events that I have coming up, people always get first crack at it through the email before it ever makes it to social media. Most of my camps typically sell out before they even make it to social media. So I through email. So people just do it there. And you'll also get access to a couple free ebooks. One is on developing a jiu-jitsu game plan, which is really useful for understanding how your jiu-jitsu game works. There's also a sort of strategies for drilling and live work. These two probably, I've been talking about this for probably about a year now. These two books are probably going to be taken away at some point, sometime soon, because I'm getting ready to change a few things up. There may be an app that I'm going to have out soon. And so these will be gone. So if you'd like to get them while they're still there, while they're still free, you can join up and do that now. But again, jiujitsu.net/join is the website. And guys, with that said, thank you so much for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed the podcast as always. And we'll talk to you next time.